Now, U.S. President Trump did post this photo of Maduro on his social media, Truth Social. And it shows Maduro wearing a sweatsuit and a blindfold with the caption, Nicolás Maduro on board the USS Iwo Jima. These are expected to arrive in New York this afternoon. And by these, he was referring to the now seemingly removed president of Venezuela. We've heard as well from U.S. Attorney General Pamela Bondi. Now, she says that the deposed leader and his wife have been now indicted in New York. On social media, she also said that they will face multiple charges, including narco-terrorism, conspiracy, and that the couple, quote, will soon face the full wrath of the American justice system on American soil in American courts. Maduro was indicted in New York in 2020, but it wasn't previously known that his wife had also been indicted.
¡Que viva Maduro! ¡Que viva Bolívar!
Now, the faithful of Maduro's movement in Venezuela are still gathering in Caracas. In the morning, these are where these images are from a few hours ago. We also have heard that Russia, which does maintain close ties to Venezuela, has called the U.S. attack deeply concerning and condemnable. Meantime, the United Nations says it is deeply alarmed by the American airstrikes. Meanwhile, these are scenes from neighboring Chile of joy and jubilation in the streets. There are thousands of Venezuelans in that country as political refugees or otherwise. They gather to celebrate the news of Maduro's capture and removal from power. The Venezuelan diaspora in Chile is one of the largest in South America. Many fled the economic collapse and the political repression under Maduro's government. Global Affairs Canada, meantime, updating its travel advisory for Venezuela, advising Canadians to avoid all travel to the country, adding the situation is tense and could escalate quickly. Canada closed its embassy in Caracas in 2019 because diplomats were no longer able to obtain credentials in the Maduro government. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand has this statement that came out a few hours ago. It says, in part, since 2019, when Canadians closed its embassy in Venezuela, we have refused to recognize any legitimacy of the Maduro regime and oppose its repression of the Venezuelan people, including the persecution of dissenters and particularly political leaders opposed to the regime. And keeping with our long-standing commitment to upholding the rule of law and democracy, Canada calls on all parties to respect international law, and we stand by the people of Venezuela and their desire to live in a peaceful and democratic society. Canada is engaging, she says, with its international partners and monitoring developments closely. Meantime, this statement coming from the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, saying congratulations to President Trump on successfully arresting narco-terrorist and socialist dictator Nicolás Maduro, who should live out his days in prison. The legitimate winner of the most recent Venezuelan elections, Edmundo González, should take office along with the courageous hero and voice of the Venezuelan people, Maria Corina Machado. Now, down with socialism, he went on to say, long live freedom. Joining me now is Albert Berry, a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto in the School of Economics. We appreciate your time, sir. And I guess to start off with, Albert, there's so many different pieces of this. What was your first reaction hearing from the American president not long ago?
Yes, I guess I was sort of summing things up as I tried to put all these exciting details in perspective. The way I sum it up is it's a very ironic situation. I think we have clearly the two worst leaders in the Western Hemisphere at odds with each other. Both of them have stolen or tried to steal elections. It's ironic that Trump, who tried to steal one, holds that against the other guy who did steal one. So it's very, very strange. It makes you wonder, how many other situations like this there are in the world where the battles are basically between bad people. And that was one of my initial reactions. And then my other, the main question in my mind is because it's a question which precedes this particular event. But the question is, when you have bad leaders, as these two are, what's going to follow? How does the country in question recover what it had before or what it could achieve, depending on how you look at it? And in this case, what will be the impacts in the two countries? Because I think there will be significant political impacts in the United States as well as obviously in Venezuela, and behaving as basically an international tyrant is not a good sort of example to be followed. On the other hand, of course, many Americans will be saying, well, the guy was so bad that somebody had to do it.
Albert, just thinking a little bit about the economic ramifications of what was described very particularly, and also with very definitive language coming from not just the American president, but Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and more from this press conference. They talked about Americans' oil interests in the country and how there will still be a maintaining of a blockade on Venezuelan oil, which has among the most documented oil reserves in the world. And then conversely, you also have them saying that American oil companies or producers will be heading into Venezuela. What do you make of that from, I guess, particularly an economic standpoint, but we can't dismiss globalization and politics from the economies of any country, of course?
Indeed, and oil is obviously a very major element in this scenario. Oil is it's worth mentioning, at least as a footnote, that somebody as corrupt as Maduro is a very normal political situation in oil countries, because oil and any other natural resource which generates so much wealth, which is so easily reached by the politicians in the country, oil invites political corruption. So it's that's part of the situation we have here on the Venezuelan side. But on the American side, you could also say that the Venezuelan oil invites behavior which is questionable, to put it mildly. So oil is a very significant part of the setting. The economic impacts of this particular event, some of them are more or less obvious, and some a good deal less so. But it's clear that Venezuela needs the revenue from oil because it has, over decades, turned itself into a country highly dependable on oil for exports. I think it's about 96% of its exports. So it really can't import very much without the oil. And so it's that sort of country, it's being that sort of country, it is sensitive to political pressure from big importers or other oil-interested countries like the United States. So Venezuela is it's not an accident, as part of the background for all of this, that Venezuela has had the least successful democratic experience over a long period in Latin America. There have been many other dictatorships and false democracies in other Latin countries, but that part of the world has gradually become more democratic, and Venezuela has continued to stand out as one of the 2 or 3 countries, including a couple in Central America, where that transition to stable, meaningful democracy has been very difficult. It's not an accident, because that is the norm in oil countries, really.
Well, Albert, I know we have very, very little time left, but just if we have, with 20 seconds, are you concerned about what the ramifications next? What are you looking at right now?
I guess I'm looking at the reaction of the American population and the American political world to such a kind of domineering act as Trump has taken. My guess is that he has taken it out of political desperation. He wants to do something dramatic because his polls are not so good. But I think that's probably the impact, or possibly the impact in the U.S. political world may turn out to be even more important than that in the Venezuelan political world.
Well, certainly the center of a pond where things ripple. We'll have to leave it there, Albert. I do appreciate your time, though. Albert Berry is a professor emeritus of economics at the University of Toronto. And thank you again, sir.